Good afternoon, guys. Welcome to today's live stream. I know I'm doing things a little bit different this week, but I just sort of wanted to test out to see sort of the engagement versus in the morning, because I know you guys have more availability to watch streams and videos in the afternoon, which is understandable. So I just wanted to test this out. I'm likely gonna this may be my normal schedule when it comes to live streams on Wednesdays. I may start doing them in the afternoons now. Again, depending on how it works out. So I really appreciate you guys for watching the stream today. Again, if you do miss the stream, I will always upload them to YouTube. My YouTube channel. I need to share that. I'm pretty sure I shared it in the past, but I can share it again so that you'll be able to watch some of my previous live streams. But again, I will be doing another. I usually do live streams every Wednesday for you guys who are just joining or who have just started watching the live streams. I used to do them on Wednesdays in the morning at around 11:30. But now I'm going to start doing them in the afternoon and see how sort of this takes off and if there's more engagement. But that's really all I wanted to preface before I got started. So I think that's it. So for today, we're going to talk about the state of obesity. So this is an important topic that I really would like to discuss and sort of go into detail about this topic because it is very important in our society today. So obesity itself is, well, I guess let me go back and discuss the modern state of health today. So obesity can be considered as one of the major health problems in the US today. Other chronic conditions such as heart disease and diabetes pose a major concern in the United States. Public health and medical treatments overall has lowered the rates of these deaths. So overall, a lot of the main health concerns of today all have to do with chronic health conditions. Heart disease is one of the major ones, as well as diabetes. And obesity is a part of that category as well. It's just it's somewhat separate because it is more of a complex disease or complex condition, I should say, than all of the other chronic health conditions. It's the fastest growing. It's one of the fastest growing health problems in America and most industrialized countries. Obesity has nearly tripled worldwide since 1975, according to the World Health Organization in 2018. So 72% of Americans older than the age of 20 years are either overweight or obese. So that's pretty much the state of obesity as it relates to, now in modern times. So, I mean, it's pretty much is self-explanatory what obesity is, but I do want to go back and just sort of explain in detail exactly what it is. So the term obesity or being overweight is basically considered a greater than normal or healthy. In other words, carrying a normal or healthy body weight. Oh, greater than normal healthy body weight, I should say. In other words, carrying excess body fat. So obesity is considered a more complex disease that can be multifaceted. So, like I just mentioned before, it's a little bit harder with obesity because it can come from a different factors as far as what influences or what causes obesity itself. And, obesity too, it is a complex disease in itself, but it's also one of the most preventable because, all it takes is sort of, monitoring your diet and, putting in proper exercise. And really, as far as being preventative, you can take small steps. Even if you are considered obese, you can take small steps a day that can drastically change your overall health, down the road, regardless if you are obese at this point. in life. So again, it's a complex disease, but it's one of the most easily preventable diseases or chronic conditions, I guess I should say, or health conditions. So I do want to mention a little bit as far as adolescent and children and obesity. So obesity in adolescent and children can greatly influence brain function, which can lead to abnormalities. So being unable to develop proper motor skills, risk of high cholesterol, risk of high blood pressure, and metabolic syndrome. So this is really, really important, especially if you're a parent and you have children that are overweight. It can influence a lot of factors in their health, with high cholesterol and high blood pressure at such a younger age due to them being overweight. It can influence brain functions. So there's a lot of negative effects, especially when it comes to children nowadays, because of the sedentary lifestyle, sitting at the computer or on their phone, or there's so many different factors that influence obesity in the modern age, especially for children now. So that's something to sort of keep in mind. Children really need more activity and exercise in their daily life that they're not getting right now because of everything being like a phone or iPad. Everything sort of is all online. So I understand it's a different generation, but exercise it's a universal thing. It can really help and impact the future of anybody. When you put into consideration your health and how your overall well-being, it's going to really change things. And this is really important for children, especially when they get to be an adult. Their health is going to be in check, and if it's not in check now, then there's going to be major effects when they become an adult and they have to sort of face all these risks that they shouldn't have to face, because if they had proper exercise and were able to diet, then they wouldn't have to face these risks. But it's important to be preventative for kids now, and it's hard to oversee. It's really easy to oversee that because of how sedentary we are now and how we are not as active as we used to be as a society. So it's really important, especially starting young with kids and having them to be more active and having a proper diet. So some of the risk factors of obesity. I somewhat discussed that as far as it relates to adolescents, and some of those can sort of be interconnected with adults as well. But some of the examples as far as risk factors for obesity can be a lack of sleep, poor nutrition, lack of physical activity, sedentary behavior, and increased screen time. So this is sort of all of what sort of leads to obesity. And again, a lot of it is lifestyle changes, small little changes that you can do in your life, fixing your nutrition, making sleep a bit more priority in your life, and sort of setting time for physical activity and not being so sedentary. I sort of discussed this in a live stream a while back, but sort of being aware of changing different lifestyle habits in your day to day can really help sort of not really stop, but be a preventative action towards obesity. And that's like taking a longer walk in the parking lot, like parking further away, maybe standing up instead of sitting down. Some of these small little lifestyle changes you can make can help with preventing obesity. Of course, not being on the phone all the time or not being sitting down on a computer all the time. Again, there's just small different things that you can do. Making some of these things more of a priority. Your nutrition would be a really great one that could really decrease that risk factor, as well as physical activity. And again, like these can be like small things that you can change. It's like I always mention with SMART goals, you want to have something that's easily attainable for you at this point in time. You just start small. If you want to start exercising for 15 minutes a day, then that's a step. It doesn't have to be this huge leap that you have to do, to reach where you want to be, or to, sort of get out of the state you're in. All you got to do is take small steps and then gradually sort of progress. So that's what it takes. It's just, changing small little lifestyle factors and, creating better and healthy habits. Okay, so understanding your baseline health. So how do you exactly know that you are considered obese or overweight? So this is somewhat, there are some factors where you notice on yourself if you are overweight. Of course, that's, you can kind of notice as far as how much you weigh or things of that nature. But to sort of understand in depth your baseline health and where you stand right now, to know if you are obese or, maybe you're just a tad overweight, some of the ways that we can sort of know for sure is body mass index. It's a great indicator of where you stand. And circumference measurements is another great one. Your waist to hip ratio, skin fold measurements, and bioelectrical impedance analysis. These are just some sort of, not really tests, but different measurements that you can do to sort of see where you stand as far as your overall health and as it relates to obesity. So body mass index is really a great indicator. And I've got right here so it's a great indicator of where you stand and it's divided. So this is sort of, I didn't finish this here, but it's basically your body mass index is all based on your height and weight. And depending on what your height is relative to your weight, that's sort of going to determine by a set of numbers sort of what category you're in, if you are obese, overweight, underweight, or at an elevated weight level. So I sort of explained a little bit about how measuring body mass index is. So it's calculated by either dividing by kilograms, by the square of the person's height, in meters dividing body weight and pounds. So having an elevated BMI increases the risk of having a risk for diseases. So it's basically dividing your weight and your height is pretty much, to sum it up and simplify it, is how you calculate your body mass index. So I do have a graph here that I'm going to show you. So this is sort of explaining in detail how body mass index is sort of broken down. If your BMI is at 18.5, you would be at an increased risk and you would be classified as being underweight. If your BMI is at 18.5 or between 18.5 and 24.9, you would be at low risk. And at a healthy weight, if your BMI is 25.0 to 29.9, you're at an increased risk. And overweight, if your BMI is 30.0, 34.9, you're at a high risk and you would be classified as obese. If your BMI is 35.0, 39.9, you would be at a very high risk and you would technically be considered in the category obesity 2. And if it's 40.0, you would be at an extremely high risk, and that would be classified as obesity 3. So that's sort of, again, the way you calculate it depends on your weight and your height. So, usually at the doctor, this is one of the things that you can sort of get. They can calculate for you, but it's all based on, your height measurement and your weight. It's basically dividing those two. So this is the end of the presentation, but I do want to sort of discuss a little bit about some of the things that you can do sort of starting out if you are somebody who is obese and you're really wanting to sort of get serious about exercising. I want to give you sort of a small little blueprint of where you can start and what you can do today, or just gradually sort of progress into. So as far as being obese, some of the things you need to be considering is doing more low impact activity. So, treadmill walking, rowing, cycling, anything of that sort. And you want to do it at least 5 days per week. Again, this can be like really small duration. It doesn't have to be, a really long duration, but enough that you can handle. So your intensity should be about 60 to 80% of your maximum heart rate. So it needs to be at a decent intensity. So it does recommend for duration. I've got here in the notes 40 to 60 minutes per day, 20 to 30 minute sessions twice each day. So again, it's smaller. You're starting in small increments, and like I think the most important thing is to be comfortable. You do want to challenge yourself though. So, if it's really too hard for you to do like exercise, like, walking or anything low impact, then just sort of separate it throughout the day where you have time and do them in durations like 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the afternoon. If you feel that you can't, do a full duration for like 30 minutes or 60 minutes. And that's as it relates to more, just simple, low impact activities. Some of the things to keep in mind, really, like if you're starting resistance training, a recommended sort of guideline for resistance training would be 1 to 3 sets of 10 to 15 repetitions, 2 to 3 days per week. So any exercise that you're doing, you just want to start at a basic level. This is usually what I base a lot of my beginner clients off of, is, this sort of basic principle, I guess you would say. Just 1 to 3 sets for resistance training exercise of 10 to 15 reps, 2 to 3 days per week. So, again, if you are somebody who would be considered obese or overweight, you just start small. And that's not only with, being overweight, that's pretty much with anything else. A lot of it with me, I was skinny, and I just had to start small. I had to, sort of gradually work myself up. And that's what it is pretty much for everybody, regardless if you're overweight or underweight. You just have to start small. And if you feel like it's too intense, don't overexert yourself. You want to go at a comfortable pace, but at the same time, you do want to challenge yourself. If you feel that, something is becoming too easy, start challenging yourself. if that's the main thing, and that's what I try to teach myself too. Because sometimes we can all go to the gym and it can be like, we just are on autopilot and we don't really think. But if you're getting to a point where you're lifting weights and they're comfortable, or you're doing the same intensity each time, and it's just there's no difficulty challenge to it, then that's when you need to start challenging yourself, when you need to start increasing the intensity, and when you need to start doing more reps or more sets. So that's something to keep in mind. Again, you just want to start small. I mean, this can be for almost anybody, but in particular, if you are overweight, you just want to start small and start with low impact activities. Sort of keep your duration at a small duration. If 30 or 60 minutes is too much, then sort of split it apart, in 15-minute increments, 20-minute increments throughout the day, in the morning or the afternoon, walking or anything of that sort. If you're doing resistance training, again, 1 to 3 sets, 10 to 15 reps, 2 to 3 days per week. That's all you would need to really get started. So I know I went a little bit over my presentation, but there were some things that I did want to discuss that I forgot to really input into the presentation. So these are some things that I really want you to take with you and, sort of explain a little bit into detail what you can do. Because it's never too late when it comes to exercise. It's never too late. You just got to start, and when you start, you just start small, and then gradually work up and challenge yourself. So I hope that you guys found this valuable. I apologize for all the few little typos I had in my presentation. I'll make sure to proofread the next one better. But thank you guys again, and I appreciate you taking the time to watch this. If you do have any questions, feel free to contact me. You can send me an email or message me. I do have my contact information here. You can always direct message me as well through Facebook. And if you have any feedback, that's totally fine with me too. I would like to, make these live streams a little bit more accessible to everybody. And I want you to be able to take value from these live streams. And that's the reason why I'm doing it. Not just to sort of, let you know I'm a personal trainer, but to also give you, information that you may not know, and some of the knowledge that I can share. So I really appreciate you guys for taking the time. Again, you can ask me any questions or concerns you have with the contact information I have here. And my next live stream will be over cardio. I've already gotten started on it, and it will likely be next Wednesday in the afternoon. I'm not going to say exactly the time because I don't know which time yet, but I will share that event here pretty soon, and you can RSVP to it. And it'll be a live stream similar to this. So again, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.